The meeting. In the dusty outskirts of New Lexington Colony on the terraformed moon of Jupiter's Callisto, lived a man whose kindness would echo through decades. Harris Coleman, at 78 years old, carried the weight of a lifetime spent building humanity's foothold among the stars. His back was bent from years of low-gravity labor, his hands weathered like ancient leather from countless repairs in the harsh vacuum of space. Silver hair caught the artificial light of the biodome, and behind his radiation protection glasses, gentle eyes held the wisdom of someone who had seen both the beauty and brutality of frontier life. Harris ran a modest food cart near the local shuttle stop, nothing fancy, just synthesized protein sandwiches, hydroponic vegetables, and algae coffee that kept the colonists going. It provided enough to supplement his small pension and keep him in his weathered cargo pod home on the dome's edge. Every morning, as the artificial sun flickered to life above the colony, Harris wheeled his cart to its familiar spot. It was on one particularly cold cycle day, when the atmospheric regulators were acting up again, that he first noticed them. 3 young dragons walked together toward the education center, but something about them made Harris pause. Unlike the other dragons in the colony, these 3 moved with a heaviness that seemed wrong for their age. Their scales lacked the typical iridescent shine, appearing dull and lifeless. Their wings dragged low, and their usually bright dragon eyes looked tired and sad. The eldest appeared to be around 14 cycles, walking protectively beside her 2 younger sisters, one about 12, the other barely 9. They stayed close together, their steps slow and deliberate, as if they were carrying burdens no young dragons should bear. What caught Harris's attention most were their food pouches. While other young dragons carried sleek, thermal-regulated containers, these 3 had small, patched pouches with fraying straps. Often, Harris noticed, the pouches hung empty, containing nothing but recycled air. The dragons kept their heads down, avoiding the artificial sunlight, their movements careful and quiet. Their scales, which should have been vibrant with youth, appeared faded, likely from mineral deficiency, something Harris recognized from his years maintaining the colony's systems. Day after day, Harris watched them make their slow journey to the education center, his heart growing heavier with each passing cycle. The sight of those empty food pouches began to haunt him. These weren't just any dragons struggling to get by, these were children, hungry and trying to make it through each day with dignity intact. On this particular morning, after the atmospheric regulators had dropped temperatures to nearly unbearable levels, Harris made a decision that would change everything. He packed up his cart early, gathered what food he could spare, a few carefully wrapped protein sandwiches and warm synth cocoa in his old but reliable thermos, and hurried after the 3 dragons. Just outside the education center gates, he called out softly, "Hey there, you 3 want some breakfast?" "It's on me." The dragons stopped, turning to face him with uncertainty in their eyes. The middle sister shifted nervously and whispered, "We don't have credits." Harris shook his head gently, offering a warm smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "That's okay. Just take it. I want you to eat." After a moment's hesitation, they accepted his offering. Finding a worn plastic bench nearby, they sat together and ate quietly. Harris watched as something shifted in their expressions, the tension in their scaled faces began to ease, their eyes slowly brightened, and for the first time in what seemed like ages, tiny puffs of contented steam escaped their nostrils. That small act of kindness marked the beginning of something neither Harris nor the 3 dragon sisters could have imagined, a bond that would span decades and transform all their lives in ways that would one day amaze an entire colony. The daily ritual. What began as a single act of kindness soon became something much more meaningful. The next morning, Harris found himself watching for the 3 dragon sisters again, and when he spotted them approaching, he was ready with warm food and gentle words. "Sarah, Emmy, Kaida," he called out, having learned their names during their first shared breakfast. "Got something good for you today." The eldest sister, Sarah, still showed hesitation, but the gratitude in her golden eyes was unmistakable. Emmy, the middle child, had begun to smile just a little when she saw Harris approaching. And little Kaida, the youngest, would peek out from behind her sisters with curious, hopeful eyes. This became their routine. Every morning before the education center opened, Harris would meet the three sisters with food, warmth, and most importantly, genuine care. He never asked about their circumstances, never made them feel like charity cases. Instead, he treated them like the bright, deserving young dragons they were. As the cycles passed, Harris began to notice subtle changes. The girls' scales started to show hints of their natural luster. They walked with slightly straighter postures, and their steps grew lighter. Sarah began to speak more openly, sharing small details about their studies. Emmy would giggle occasionally at Harris's gentle jokes about the quirks of colony life. And Kaida started bringing him small drawings she'd made in her classes, crude but heartfelt sketches of dragons and humans sharing meals. Harris learned that the sisters had been on their own for several cycles, their parents lost in a mining accident that had left many families in the outer colonies struggling. They lived in a tiny shared space in the low-income sector, surviving on minimal rations and whatever small work they could find after their studies. Despite their hardships, the sisters never complained. Sarah, mature beyond her years, worked extra shifts in the hydroponic gardens. Emmy helped with data entry for the colony administrators. Even little Kaida did her part, sorting recyclable materials in the evenings. Harris admired their determination and resilience. These young dragons weren't just surviving, they were fighting to build better lives for themselves. His daily offerings of food became more than mere sustenance, they became a foundation of stability and hope in their uncertain world. Word of Harris's kindness began to spread quietly through the colony. Other vendors occasionally contributed food or supplies, which Harris would pass along to the sisters without fanfare. The education center staff, noticing the girls' improved health and performance, quietly arranged for some additional academic support. But Harris remained the constant. Rain or shine, through atmospheric storms and equipment failures, he was there each morning with food, warmth, and the unwavering message that someone cared about them. The three sisters had found something they'd lost when their parents died, a sense of family, of belonging, of being valued for who they were. As the cycles turned into years, this simple daily ritual created bonds that went far deeper than anyone could have imagined. Harris wasn't just feeding three hungry dragons, he was nurturing three young souls who would one day grow into something extraordinary, shaped by the kindness of one elderly man who refused to look the other way when children needed help. Growing bonds. Years flowed like the artificial tides in the colony's water recycling systems. Harris's hair grew whiter, his movements a little slower, but his commitment to the three dragon sisters never wavered. The girls, meanwhile, began to flourish in ways that amazed everyone who knew their story. Sarah, now approaching her 20s, had become one of the top students in the colony's engineering program. Her natural intelligence, combined with years of practical experience helping maintain their humble living space, made her a standout in advanced terraforming systems. The same girl who once walked with her head down now carried herself with quiet confidence, though she never forgot to stop by Harris's cart each morning. Emmy discovered a talent for biotechnology, specifically in the hydroponic systems that kept the colony fed. Her work with plant genetics and atmospheric cultivation earned her recognition from the colony's agricultural council. The shy middle sister had grown into a young dragon with a bright laugh and innovative ideas. Little Kaida, no longer so little at 15 cycles, showed an extraordinary gift for communications and colony administration. Her childhood drawings had evolved into sophisticated technical illustrations, and her natural empathy made her invaluable in managing the complex social dynamics of colony life. But for all their individual success, the three sisters maintained their morning ritual with Harris. It had evolved over the years, now they often brought food to share with him, and their conversations covered everything from colony politics to dreams of expanding to other moons. Harris had become more than a benefactor, he was family in every way that mattered. The elderly man watched with pride as the dragons he'd first seen as hungry, struggling children grew into capable, compassionate young adults. They embodied the best of what the colonies could produce, resilient, intelligent, and deeply caring individuals who understood the value of community. Harris began to slow down as his 80s approached. Some mornings, the sisters would find him moving stiffly, his hands shaking slightly as he prepared their shared breakfast. Without fanfare, they began taking over more of the routine. Sarah would arrive early to help set up the cart, Emmy would bring supplements to ensure Harris was eating well, and Kaida would make sure he was taking his medication. The roles had gradually reversed, but the love remained constant. Harris had given them hope when they had none, and now they were determined to give him comfort and dignity as he aged. The morning meetings continued, but they became as much about caring for Harris as they had once been about the sisters' survival. Other colonists began to take notice of this unusual family. Harris Coleman and his 3 dragon daughters, as people started calling them, became a symbol of what was possible in the harsh environment of space colonization. Not just survival, but genuine human, and dragon, connection that transcended species and circumstance. As Harris approached his 80th birthday, the sisters began planning something special. They had never forgotten that first morning when a kind old man decided that 3 hungry dragon children deserved better. Now, they were determined to show him just how much that kindness had meant, and how far it had rippled through their lives and the entire colony. The transformation. 25 years had passed since that first cold morning when Harris Coleman offered breakfast to 3 hungry dragon sisters. Now, as Harris celebrated his 103rd birthday, remarkable even by the standards of enhanced colony medicine, those 3 sisters had become the most accomplished young dragons on Callisto. Sarah had risen to become the colony's chief environmental engineer, responsible for the atmospheric systems that kept 30,000 colonists alive. Her innovations in low-gravity terraforming had been adopted by colonies throughout the outer system. Emmy now directed the entire agricultural division, her breakthroughs in nutrient synthesis ensuring that no child on Callisto would ever go hungry as she once had. Kaida had become the youngest colony administrator in the moon's history, her natural empathy and sharp intelligence making her beloved by settlers from every sector. But success hadn't changed their hearts. Every morning, the 3 sisters still gathered around Harris's old food cart, though now it was stationed in the center of the colony's main plaza, decorated with flowers and surrounded by comfortable seating that the sisters had installed. Harris moved slowly now, requiring a mobility assist chair on difficult days, but his eyes still sparkled with the same kindness that had first drawn the sisters to him. His voice was softer, but his words carried the weight of a century of wisdom and love. The morning of his 103rd birthday, Harris woke to find something extraordinary waiting outside his new home, no longer the cramped cargo pod of his earlier years, but a comfortable dwelling the sisters had built for him in the heart of the colony. Thousands of colonists had gathered in the main plaza. Dragons and humans stood side by side, holding banners and signs that read, "Thank you, Harris," and "The kindness that built our community." But what took Harris's breath away was the centerpiece of the celebration. The 3 sisters had commissioned a beautiful sculpture for the plaza, a representation of an elderly human man sharing food with 3 young dragons, crafted from the finest materials the colony could produce. But the sculpture was more than art, it was the foundation for something unprecedented. "Harris," Sarah said, her voice carrying across the gathered crowd through the plaza's sound system, 25 years ago, you taught us that kindness creates ripples that never stop spreading. Emmy stepped forward, holding a data pad that displayed colony records. "Because of your example, we've established the Coleman Foundation, a permanent endowment that ensures no child in any colony will ever go hungry or lack education opportunities." Kaida, tears of joy streaming down her scaled cheeks, added, "But that's not all. Your kindness inspired a generation. Look around you." Harris looked and saw faces he recognized, former students of the sisters, colleagues they'd mentored, families they'd helped. Each person held a sign describing how the sisters' work had touched their lives, and how it all traced back to one man's simple decision to share his breakfast with 3 hungry children. "You didn't just feed us," Sarah continued, her voice thick with emotion. "You showed us what it means to build a real community. Every environmental system I design, I think about creating spaces where kindness can flourish. Every crop Emmy develops considers how to nourish not just bodies, but souls. Every policy Kaida implements asks how we can better care for each other." The crowd erupted in applause that seemed to shake the dome itself. But Harris saw something else that moved him even more deeply. Scattered throughout the crowd were other elderly colonists sitting with young dragons and humans they'd taken under their wings, other food vendors who now made it their practice to help struggling families, other community leaders who led with compassion rather than authority. His simple act of kindness had become a philosophy that shaped an entire society. The three sisters he'd helped had grown into leaders who embodied the values he'd shown them, and they'd passed those values on to countless others. As the celebration continued around him, Harris realized that his life had accomplished something he'd never imagined possible. He hadn't just survived the harsh realities of space colonization, he'd helped create a community where kindness wasn't just an occasional gesture, but the foundation upon which an entire civilization was built. Embrace, but the sisters knew the best way to honor Harris wasn't through mourning, but through action. They established the Harris-Coleman Memorial Breakfast Program, ensuring that every morning, volunteers throughout the colony would gather to share food and kindness with anyone who needed it. The program spread beyond New Lexington. Within a year, colonies on Europa, Titan, and even the asteroid mining stations had implemented their own versions. The simple act of sharing breakfast had become a symbol of human and dragon cooperation throughout the outer system. But the most remarkable tribute came from an unexpected source. The three sisters discovered that Harris had been quietly documenting not just his daily life, but the stories of everyone he'd helped over the decades. His journals contained hundreds of entries about colonists who'd received small acts of kindness from him, a free meal during a difficult time, a listening ear during personal crises, or simply the steadying presence of someone who cared. Following the addresses in Harris's journals, the sisters began reaching out to these people. They found that Harris's influence had spread far beyond what anyone had imagined. Former customers had become teachers, doctors, engineers, and leaders throughout the outer colonies. Many had established their own informal networks of support and kindness, all tracing back to the example set by an elderly man with a food cart. A young engineer on Europa had designed revolutionary life support systems after Harris helped her family during a food shortage. A doctor on Titan credited Harris's patient listening during his father's illness with inspiring his career in medicine. A mining station administrator had implemented colony-wide support programs after watching Harris care for the three dragon sisters. The ripples of kindness had created waves that reached across the solar system. On the 5th anniversary of Harris's passing, the three sisters, now respected leaders in their 40s, stood before the memorial sculpture in New Lexington's plaza. Around them, hundreds of families shared the traditional morning meal that had become the colony's most cherished ritual. He always said we were the ones who changed his life, Sarah reflected, watching young dragons and human children play together around the memorial fountain. But look at what he really did, Emmy added, gesturing to the thriving community around them. He showed us that survival isn't enough. Building a civilization means building connections between hearts. Kaida, now the senior administrator for all the outer colonies, smiled as she watched a group of elderly colonists teaching young children how to prepare the traditional memorial breakfast. Every morning, thousands of people throughout the system start their day by sharing kindness with strangers. That's his real monument. As the artificial sun reached its zenith in the dome above, casting warm light over the bustling plaza, the three sisters knew that Harris-Coleman's legacy wasn't just preserved in their memories or even in the programs they'd established. It lived in every act of kindness, every shared meal, every moment when someone chose compassion over indifference. An elderly food cart vendor had fed 3 hungry dragons for 25 years, and in doing so, had planted the seeds of kindness that grew into an entire civilization's defining philosophy. His simple belief that every person, human or dragon, deserved care and dignity had become the foundation upon which humanity built its future among the stars. In the end, Harris-Coleman had achieved something that escaped most people, even those who conquered planets or commanded vast fleets. He had created a legacy that would outlive the colonies themselves, carried forward in the hearts of every person who chose kindness over cruelty, connection over isolation, and love over fear. The end.